How do you destroy something that's indestructible? Well, I've got news for you. While Bitcoin is the most resilient system we've ever known, it's not totally immune from attacks. And while it can't be just utterly destroyed, it can be subverted or controlled in various ways. And the only way to fully destroy the network of Bitcoin would be to turn off every computer in the world and keep them off forever, or shut down the internet, or shut down all electricity in the world. But even if you did that, or even if you destroyed every node and miner, the network could still start up right where it left off. So that's not a viable option, even if it were possible. And regardless, a world without electricity or computers or the internet looks so vastly different than today that it's not even worth speculating about, in my opinion. But how do you, if someone wanted to, obviously it would take vast resources and power and influence to even attempt this, but how would you start to control or alter, modify Bitcoin if you wanted to harm it? Well, it comes down to the things that make Bitcoin so valuable and unique, namely its decentralization. Bitcoin is the most decentralized network of anything on Earth. Security. Bitcoin is by far the most secure computer network the world has ever seen. I think it just hit 1 zettahash recently, 1,000 exahash, and it's fluctuating around there. And its scarcity. Bitcoin's the most scarce asset the world has ever known. So if you can somehow influence these three things negatively, you could potentially, in theory, bring significant harm to Bitcoin over time. And it would have to be more of a drop by drop, slowly boiling a frog type of thing. You wouldn't be able to just accomplish much in any one day, month, or even a year, probably. So what you would have to do, again, is somehow figure out a way to make Bitcoin less decentralized by maybe controlling miners or nodes, getting them all together under one or a few umbrellas, impacting the scarcity by either gaining significant control over the market and the supply, or possibly altering the code to make it so people could create additional supply. And undermining the security, there's some overlap here. Undermining security could be done also by centralizing the mining. And so let's look at where we are today. Mining has become highly centralized. There's a handful of large companies that control a major portion of the hash rate, and there's a handful of mining pools that contain the majority of the hash rate. Now, while this isn't a pressing problem today, it's still somewhat of a concern, because if these miners wanted to, they could collude and do something like a 51% attack, although that makes no sense because they would just nuke their entire business model and they'd go bankrupt in a very short time frame. So they have no incentive to do that. That's one of the beauties of the protocol, is the economic incentives make it so anyone with their wits about them would just become an honest participant in the network rather than trying to attack or destroy it. But the centralization of mining is pretty much complete at this point. If that was an avenue someone wanted to attack, the point of failure does more or less exist. Now, that started to change somewhat with BitAxe miners, which are really cool. There's just this one little, they're like the size of a credit card approximately, and they give you about a terahash of mining power. So with a lot of people around the world putting those in their homes, they're affordable, a couple $100, and they don't take that much electricity. So not everyone, but they're accessible to a lot of people. And so that distributes some of the hash rate. It's still a far cry from the massive hash rate that these public mining companies have with their giant warehouses all over the world full of miners. And so progress is being made on that front. And again, it's not a super immediate threat, because what are they going to do? They're not going to destroy themselves. But the point is, that attack vector now exists because mining has become so highly centralized. So it is somewhat of a concern. Now, secondly, the security, that also plays into the security, right? If you wanted to somehow damage Bitcoin's security, you would control the miners. You could turn, if every public miner decided to shut everything down at once, the hash rate would drop significantly. That would make the network a lot less secure, although that's also highly unlikely. You could develop a quantum computer powerful enough to crack Shor's algorithm, for example, or possibly SHA-256, and then be able to attack the network, start cracking open wallets. If with Shor's algorithm, you could derive private keys from public keys, meaning you could look at someone's public key address on the blockchain and then figure out their private key from that, because the way it works is you have your private key, like your master password to your wallet, and you can create a bunch of public keys that are derived from that. And that process uses the SHA-256 encryption algorithm. Sorry, that's the mining algorithm. The encryption for the private key to the public key could be broken by a quantum computer using Shor's algorithm. So they can reverse engineer the process that public key was created with and figure out the private key. So there's also progress being made in that realm. Some people believe that ECDSA encryption, which is the encryption that protects Bitcoin wallets, could be broken by quantum computers in as little as 2 years. I don't personally agree with that. I've done a lot of research and writing on the subject. I'm not just being biased because I don't want that to happen. I try to be a realist, but I don't see that happening so soon. Someone mentioned one time, what incentive do companies like Microsoft have to lie about the fact that quantum computers are advancing that rapidly? Well, obviously they want you to buy their stock. If they say quantum computer is going this fast and we're developing it and it's going to be revolutionary, then it would make sense to buy their stock, right? Because whatever company develops a fully functioning, powerful enough quantum computer first is going to the moon. So to me, it seems pretty obvious the incentive they have to lie, but who knows? Most estimates say that it would take decades, somewhere between 20 and 50 years, for quantum computers to be viable enough. And there's a difference here. A difference between being powerful enough to crack encryption like that and actually having the capability, having a practical app where someone can use the quantum computer to crack encryption. The power is progressing quickly, but there's still no practical applications for quantum computers whatsoever. There's a whole bunch of improvements that need to be made in that area. Some people think, some experts, scientists even believe it would require breakthroughs in physics and mathematics and engineering to even achieve that. So that's a long, complex technical issue. Maybe I'll make a video about just that specifically at some point, because it's a deep, deep rabbit hole. So undermine the security. Again, you could somehow utilize this single point of failure that's been created by the centralization of miners, or you could just create a quantum computer powerful enough with a practical application to crack encryption. However, doing that is only useful so long as no one knows about it. You'd have to target very specific wallets that it wouldn't be obvious what happened, because as soon as anyone knows that's happening, it's over, right? And everybody's going to panic. Everyone would sell their Bitcoin. Everyone would take their money out of the banks. They would, because everything would be broken, right? It wouldn't just be Bitcoin. If you can crack Bitcoin, you can crack anything on the internet. So you'd want to keep that a secret as much as possible. And if you have to keep it secret, there's really only so much you can do with it. So it's another interesting paradox in that regard. Finally, the scarcity is the other thing you would have to undermine to somehow attack Bitcoin. And the most obvious way to do this would be to centralize the supply. And that's another thing we are seeing happen with, a handful of entities owning all of this Bitcoin, MicroStrategy alone, or strategy now, sorry, has over 500,000 Bitcoin, I believe. So they've got over 2% on the supply now. The ETFs, I think it's over 1 million, 1 point something million for, BlackRock and Fidelity and all the other ETFs. And what makes that situation even worse is that Fidelity is the only ETF issuer that custodies their own Bitcoin because they have the Fidelity digital assets arm. So they already have the existing infrastructure that they can use to custody their own coins, whereas nobody else does. BlackRock and all the others, there's BlackRock, Fidelity, and at least 9 other ETF issuers. All of them, I could be mistaken about this, but most all of them, I'm pretty sure 100% of them, aside from Fidelity, custody their coins with Coinbase. And so that creates a potential single point of failure. Again, it's the kind of thing that isn't really a problem today, although there are various ways that it could become a problem at some point in the future. If the US government decided Bitcoin was bad, or they didn't like Coinbase, or they didn't like the ETF issuers, then they know where the Bitcoin's at. If they wanted to seize Bitcoin the way they seized gold almost 100 years ago, then they have quite an easy way to do that now. They can just compel the US-based corporation of Coinbase to do whatever, right? And what are they going to do about it? So that is kind of a concern. But at the same time, someone with 1 million Bitcoin has no more control over the protocol than someone with 1 Satoshi does. And that's the beautiful thing about it. But that assumes, going back to the original point of decentralization, see, this is all kind of intertwined here. To affect all of this, you would want to influence the code base, because from influencing the code base, you can control everything potentially. And that goes back to decentralization, because since there's thousands of node runners all over the world, you can't attack every single one. You can't stop people from running a node, and people can run whichever version of the software they choose, thereby controlling what transactions can be validated by their node. And if enough people decide that a certain type of transaction is not valid, then it will take much longer for those to be confirmed. If 100% of node participants don't want a certain type of transaction, then any block with those type of transactions will not be confirmed. So that's the idea, is that the decentralization is a powerful aspect, perhaps the most powerful, because it makes the network entirely resistant to attacks, because it's controlled by a consensus of independent individuals who decide what the rules of the network are going to be. And we're seeing attacks on this vector now too lately, as you've seen my past 2 long form videos about the whole Bitcoin Core and op return debacle. And while I have to correct something I said in a previous video, is that change has not been implemented. The latest version of Bitcoin Core 29.0 doesn't contain that. I guess they're gonna put it in a few months from now or something. Not sure, but I still haven't switched to Bitcoin Knots. Probably gonna do that soon. I'm on the older version of Core 28.1, I want to say, but I've got Knots ready to go. Just have to make the switch. So just a little recap here. If someone wanted to destroy Bitcoin, say a group of the most powerful people in the world, they would need to undermine the decentralization, the supply and scarcity, and potentially the security. Really, if you just got the decentralization, if you just impacted that severely enough, then you wouldn't even really need the other 2 vectors. But in my opinion, the thing that makes the most sense would be not to, if I were someone of means and that powerful and Bitcoin was a threat to my interests, I would try to just make a little progress on each front slowly over time, so that no one realized what I was doing until it was too late. Little things like removing the spam filters in Bitcoin Core, so that people can just spam the network and it becomes more of a cloud storage thing, becomes more like Ethereum or Solana or Avalanche or Polkadot. instead of just being contained to a monetary network, which is Bitcoin's only primary use case. So I would just make a little progress on all these fronts, slowly centralize the supply, slowly centralize the mining, and try to covertly kind of influence the code base and the developers, which, again, I'm not trying to be alarmist here, because it sounds a little concerning, right? If you're hearing this for the first time and didn't really think about these things before, there is progress being made. That's the whole point of this video, is that there's progress being made on all those fronts, right? Their supply is becoming more centralized. Mining is becoming more centralized. And now the code base is being manipulated, tampered with, influenced, whatever you want to call it. Someone has paid core developers to try and put in this change that doesn't make any sense. There's no urgent need for it. It's not like a super useful upgrade. It's just the weirdest thing ever. And that's what really drew my attention to this, and kind of made me have this epiphany that, oh, wow, there is progress being made on these fronts that could hurt Bitcoin in the long term. And, I thought at first it was more of a, if you can't beat them, join them type of thing when it comes to the large financial institutions and even nation states now adopting Bitcoin. And it could still be the case. I think it might be. But the other more cynical conspiratorial perspective would be to say that, well, look, they're hoping to control it any way they can, going slowly, bit by bit, and hoping that no one notices what's happening. So that would still be a if you can't beat them, join them thing, right? Because they have no way to directly attack the network. It's not possible. So perhaps they're trying to just influence it slowly over time and lead it in a direction that it was not originally intended for, lead it to be more controlled and just slowly influence it. Because again, that's all you can really do. You can't control Bitcoin. You can't destroy it. The only thing you could hope to do if you were against it would be to subtly control it and steer it in a manner of your choosing. So I think that's pretty much it. That's going to do it for this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you found value in this. And I'll also drop a link in the description to my website, as I usually do, but also to my free reports on why Bitcoin matters for your future, your family, your finances, which goes into detail on the 3 monetary problems that Bitcoin solve. So thanks for being here today. If you made it this far, I'm Brian Nibley. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow me everywhere on social media, and I'll see you next time.